So, today we are going to talk about Pygame and Pyxel. I hope everybody's doing okay on their text adventures in Python. But before we start any of that, what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about, you guys got an email about student support services. My level design class did ask about this, so I wanted to pass it along. It is in your student email, but it's going to talk about how to get emergency aid and services, mental health services, the pop-up markets, which, okay guys, it's no shame. If you need to go get food, please do go get food. It's pretty nice. You pre-register, and then you sit in your car, they bring you out a bag of food. So, yeah. And it's available to everybody, students, employees. So, and depending on, let's see who actually has it right now. Because depends on, oh hey, Lakeview's gonna have one, or had one, because that was the 22nd. So, they do them about once a month. So, if you need them, they exist. Yeah, and they exist all across the Alamo colleges. So, please, if you need it, please use it. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So, with that said, let's talk about, okay, so, before I start talking about this, I have started, oh, excuse me, grading your, postmortems and a few of the other things that you had to do. Please note that I have been leaving comments on your postmortems, so please go read them. Because, yeah, some of you really beat yourself up about it, and it's okay. It really is. It really is. So, like I said previously, you're gonna have less time to work on your Pygame Pyxel things. Only because now that you kind of understand how Lua works, you should sort of be able, Lua and Love, you should sort of be able to get this working faster. Yeah. So, the first question that you probably have is, why are there two things? Why is there Pygame? Why is there Pyxel? So, Pygame and Pyxel are both engines / libraries that use Python, so the language that we are now using, to create games. They both have their pros and their cons. I will say that writing games in Pyxel, it's a lot easier to code. However, you will basically not find any tutorials for things in Pyxel, because it's new, it's not as well used. It's kind of an old school emulator kind of style, so it really limits a lot of stuff. But it is remarkably simpler than Pygame is. However, with Pygame, you will find any kind of tutorial that you could possibly ever want under the sun. Pygame is also really, really old, which means it's been patched and is kind of held together with duct tape and rags. So there's going to be a lot of things in there that it's just like, why does this work but this doesn't? Or tiny little things that are going to cause problems. And I'm not trying to sway your way either way, but you do have an option. And I'm giving you the option because you may actually take to Pyxel faster and be like, oh yeah, I can do this. But you also may want Pygame, because Pygame is easy. Or not easy, it has lots of tutorials, which means that you don't really have to think on your own. So, let's talk a little bit, or let's look at the websites first. So, Pygame. Oh, they changed their color scheme. Yay. So Pygame used to be, I love lime green, but it used to be this ugly, weird green color. And again, you can install if you want to install, but REPL does have both Pygame and Pyxel already set up for you to use. There's getting started. There's how to install it for just about no matter like what you're running. If you're running Windows, if you're running Raspberry Pi, if you're running Mac or Unix, things like that. So it also has a pretty there we go. There's our grow screen. It has a pretty large wiki that is more extensive than the one that we saw for Lua. They do have tutorials, so you can go through the tutorials if you want to go through the tutorials. A newbie guide, which is nice. Making games tutorial. And it's just kind of, and then it will have like all the stuff that you could possibly need. So, and you can search it and things like that. So, and it's, yeah. So, this is kind of what this looks like. And this is extensive. This is very large. And the reason why I wanted to show you what this looks like is because whereas this is humongous, and I just set my sensitivity on my mouse wrong. Okay, because this is kind of humongous and kind of looks closer to what we talked about when we looked at Love and Lua. Pyxel, on the other hand, is a grand total of 1 page, basically. It has a wiki. It has a smaller wiki, but they say that all you need to do to start all you need to do to start programming and making games in Pyxel is to memorize these codes. Just that page. That's it. And it, again, has an installer. It has an installer for Macs, Linux, and PC. This is the first one. And you can kind of do a couple different other environments. So they do have examples for how to do different things, how to make Snake, how to make shooter kind of game, a click game. And like I said, Pyxel is incredibly easy. This is kind of how to draw a window that initializes at 160 by 120, and then if you press the Q key, it quits, and it just draws a rectangle. It looks a lot like what we saw with Love and Lua, insofar as it's very clean, it's very simple, it's very to the point. It does suggest that you wrap it in what they call a class, or not what they call a class, in a class, and they call it app, but it's literally the same thing. It's basically the same thing. You just run it after you write the class. So that's kind of how we were writing functions. A class is kind of, these are all functions. And then a class is kind of, for those that don't understand what a class is like the parent to all the children. So you've got all your functions, who are your children, and then you have your class, which is mom, dad, whatever you want to call it. And it kind of keeps them all together. So, yeah. So that's kind of Pyxel. That's, yeah, like, it's literally just one thing. There's not a huge wiki. There's not lots of super explanations. It has a wiki, but last I checked, yeah, it's not exactly the best thing. It's got an FAQ, it's got user examples, but it's got a user manual, which is literally going to take us back to this. So, yeah. So that's kind of the difference. And like I said, if we type in Pyxel Game Engine tutorial, you're not going to see a lot of, you're gonna see this one, but I actually give you this one. Or maybe I give you this one. I think I give you that one. You're not gonna see a lot of things. You are gonna see that there is a Udemy course on it, so it's getting up there in popularity, but it's not, yeah, it's not exactly like Pygame, which if you type in you're gonna get all sorts of things. So, just know that that's a thing. Okay, so some of the major differences or things that are similar. They both use Python 3. So the tutorial that I gave you guys used Python 2. Python 3 has some very, very basic changes, which I gave you guys. If you looked at the text adventure assignment, there is a list that tells you what the differences or what you need to remember between them. It's not a lot of crazy things, it's just some small kind of cosmetic things. So for Pygame, you can have a window of any size. So you can make your 800 by 600 window. You can make your whatever you want to do, 1080p or anything like that. All that's great. But like I said, Pyxel is meant to kind of be pixelated. It's meant to be kind of an old school kind of Game Boy screen. So it will only let you create a window up to 255 by 255. Anything past that and it's unhappy. Pygame, you can have anything, any color you want. Pyxel, on the other hand, you can only have a 16 color palette. So when you were looking at this is the standard palette. That being said, you can edit the palette. It's not hard. You can change these colors to be whatever 16 colors you want them to be. However, there's only 16 colors. And it will, if you put something in that's not the right color or that isn't in one of the colors, one of your 16 colors, it will change it to a color, the closest color that it can find to whatever you've put. So sound doesn't work in REPL. However, if you're doing it outside of REPL, Pygame can support whatever kind of sound file you throw at it, basically. Unless it's something strange, but it'll support OTGs and MP3s, etc., etc. Caveat about MP3s. MP3s encode a moment of silence at the beginning and the end of the clip. So, yeah, even if you splice it out, sometimes it'll still be there. So they're not the best option. WAV files and OTGs tend to be better because they don't have that pause. And with Pyxel has a built-in sound engine, which kind of makes chiptune music, but you have to use it. You can't actually import a music file for them. So their editor's fun. So external images, Pygame, you can have as many as you want. You know, throw all those sprites up. However, Pygame in and of itself doesn't have a sprite sheet editor or a sprite sheet cutter or a really easy way to kind of define a sprite in a sprite sheet. There are all sorts of things that you can find out there that are like add-ons to Pygame that will give it sprite sheet functionality, but on its own, it doesn't have it. So Pyxel, on the other hand, you can only have 3 image files. And those are meant to be tile maps and sprite sheets. They can be a max 256 by 256. And yeah, it's basically you're creating tile maps, you're pushing as much information, as much images into those little tiny squares as you can. And then you go ahead and you can cut it up inside of their sprite sheet editors. Or if you use only a couple of images, then you can 100% take and just upload 3 images and only have 3 images in your thing. Pyxel also has a sprite editor and a built-in tile map, so if we come over here, that's what this is kind of displaying. You can actually draw your sprites inside of it. You can edit your maps. You can do all that kind of stuff. So, and this is their chiptune kind of thing. And yeah, so like we saw with love, there's certain things that can be drawn easily, like directly inside of it without you having to actually have an image. So for Pygame, those are arcs, circles, ellipses, rectangles, multi-point lines, closed polygons, points, and text. Inside of Pyxel, the only support they have is for circles, rectangles, triangles, straight lines, and text. So you can kind of start to see how Pygame has a lot more functionality, whereas Pyxel is a lot more pared down. And it depends on who you are as to which one you kind of like better, but just yeah. So as far as text goes and how text works, so text inside of Pygame, you can use whatever font you could possibly ever want. You just import the font, like, so you grab the font and you put it into your file stuff. And how it works is it draws like a text box, and then it draws your text inside that text box. So what's cool about that is that then you can apply any of like any things that you would normally apply to a rectangle, you can apply to your text box. So like it can have collision, it can do a lot of things. Font can be moved inside of Pyxel, but it's not really an object in and of itself, so it doesn't really have sprite properties, but you can force it. Like you can put an invisible rectangle behind it or whatever, however you want to do it. So that's kind of how that, and it uses that default font, so that Pyxel font, that's what it uses. You don't really have a choice behind that. So to write just a simple, I say 160 by 120, but I 100% wrote this as 320 by 240. To write kind of just a basic thing that says hello world up in the top little title bar. These are how it's done. So you import for Pygame, you import Pygame. You have to use initialize, so you pygame.init. You set your width, you set your size, your width and your height, you set your size. You tell it, hey, I want the display, I want to set the mode, I want to set the size, this is what it's going to be. So now this is what tells it, hey, the window is now 320 by 240. Then you set the caption. You tell it, nah, the game's over, or the game, you give it a game over function. And again, we saw this in Love, where you could kind of do while not 1 or while not 0, play the game or continue the game. Pygame is really, really fickle because there's a bunch of different ways. Well, not really fickle. It's actually really open about it because everybody who programs in Pygame programs their loop a different way. They all work. You're just going to see 9 million different ways to program kind of a game loop. But so what we say is, while the game's not over, for every event in Pygame, event.get, if the event type is Pygame quit, so if we've pressed the quit button, then game over equals true, and kill the display. Whereas for Pyxel, it's, hey, we want a MacDaddy class. We're going to use def __ init _ self. And then we're going to say pixel.init. We want to set the window to 160 by 120 with the caption hello Pyxel. So that's all done in one line. Hey, Pyxel, now you need to run yourself. So run your self.update and your self.draw. Looks a lot like Love. Then we define update, which is like saying, hey, you know, press the button. If this button's pressed, quit. If not, just keep going. And then to do nothing, this is really important because even if you don't draw anything, you have to have this portion, which says, hey, I want to draw to myself, so I want to draw to my window, and I want to clear the screen. Where we didn't see this as much in Love, and you will see it inside of Pygame a bit, inside of Pyxel and Pygame, you have to basically manually tell it to delete the screen. So, after you're done with drawing the first frame, so if we think of it like animation frames, after you're drawing the first animation frame, you have to clear that away before you draw the next one. Otherwise, again, if you're animation, you get kind of like this onion skinning kind of thing. If you don't understand what that means, you basically get a shadow of what the previous thing is because it doesn't delete what's behind it. And if you don't automatically say, hey, completely draw a rectangle on top of everything, it doesn't. So suddenly things are like jittering and you have a trail of objects across your screen. And that's kind of what that's for. So, how to clear the screen. Inside of Pygame, it's the idea that you do screen.fill and your color code, so whatever your background color is, and then whatever you have in your drawing, and then the last one you use is display, or pygame.display.flip. Whereas inside of Pyxel, you just put this at the beginning of your drawing. So pixel.clearscreen, that's what CLS is, and then your color code. Remember, we have 16 colors that we can use, so this one clears it to black because 0 is automatically black. Yeah, and we'll look at this in a minute. So, wikis, we already saw this. Pygame has a massive wiki. Pyxel, not so much. There are a ton of example projects and a ton of tutorials inside of the Pygame wiki. There's a very, very small amount for Pyxel. And then, I've kind of already said this. So, Pygame is good. And if it sounds like I'm saying it's not, that's not what I'm saying. I find Pygame to be kind of bloated and, yeah, how I say here, it often feels like trying to cook soup in a colander that's been crudely patched with duct tape. It says something that they've been working on Pygame version 2 for over a decade now without a release. So, yeah, it can be harder to understand. However, there are so many tutorials out there that if you kind of figure out what kind of game you want to make, you can just Google it and you can probably find it. Whereas Pyxel's a lot easier to pick up if you could understand the base codes. It has very few commands that you have to memorize. Everything follows common sense. But the problem is that it is so simple and so not used that, one, you don't get all those tutorials that you do with Pygame. But two, it also ends up with a lot of heavy restrictions because of size and images and stuff like that. It's structured basically exactly like how we saw Love was structured, but again, you're not going to be able to find the tutorials out there to help you if you need that. Yeah. So, I do have the one kind of Pyxel thing that I found is this guy who speeds up his code beyond all belief and kind of shows you how to make, I don't remember if he actually starts, it's kind of a Space Invader, sort of, not really, it's more of a collect all the things falling, or avoid them, I don't remember. So I do have that. He does have his source code. There are other user examples out there, and they generally have all of their code up, so you can kind of go look at their code. This one, if I remember right, is procedurally generated, so it like randomly creates your maze, which is kind of cool. You snake. I have, they call it air hockey. That's cute. It's just basically Pong. And then Pong. And apparently Minesweeper exists. Tetris. Copter, which is kind of Flappy Bird. And then the wonderful, if you don't have internet and you try to open Google, you get your little dinosaur game. Asteroids. A chopping tree game. And then an avoid the bunny shooting pink carrots kind of game. As far as what they have for examples. And then, on the other hand, like I said, Pygame's got tons and tons and tons and tons of things. I do suggest this guy's really quick 2-hour intro to Pygame. And I know I say really quick and you guys are like, 2 hours is not really quick. But in the long scheme of things, there are universities out there that literally spend the entire semester teaching Pygame and just Pygame. It can be a class in and of itself. It can be a 2-part class at other universities. And you guys are kind of getting a crash course so that you can just produce something. Yeah. He does have an accent, which for some people is an issue. I get it. But it's relatively, I say short, but he's very good. I enjoy his kind of quick and down and dirty. And it does walk you through building this kind of game. Like an actual kind of more of a Space Invaders type thing that you can make bigger or smaller. So, feel free to use that as your basis if you want. Again, I'm not asking you to do things all from your head. Yeah, it'd be wonderful and it would be great if you could sit and do everything on your own without looking at a tutorial. But we all know that's not how this is going to work. At least for the majority of you. You're going to want to find something that at least gives you the basics of what you're wanting. Last semester, I had people build all sorts of things. The one that's actually being continued on is I had a student last semester who built Zelda, more or less, tried to build Zelda, which is way, way, way outblown for the 2 weeks, 3 weeks that you guys, I think you have 2 weeks to work on it. However, because things went awry with one of his classes, he is basically having to take an independent study, and his independent study, he's continuing on and actually has gotten really far into making the game incredibly nice. So it's a thing. Is Pygame used for the Python games in the industry? Not as much. Like Doki Doki Literature Club was written in Pygame, in Python, but it wasn't written in Pygame. But some Pygame examples of games that do exist out there. This is honestly, it's a hilarious kind of dating sim. I'm not a dating sim person, but it's ridiculous and it's full of typos and everything like that, so it makes me laugh hysterically because if I haven't already said it 800 times, my first degree I ever got, my first bachelor's degree is in English, and so I was a literature and grammar teacher and editor for 5 years, something like that. So yeah, I'm one of those people that grammar mistakes make me laugh more than anything else. Yeah, because I've seen it all. And then in book publishing I saw even worse, so yeah. So that's kind of cute. Again, we've got a potato game, because why not? So there's, I don't even remember what this one is. Oh yeah, it's Doom. So you could 100% make Doom if you wanted to make Doom, because why not? Planet Busters. And again, my suggestion, just like with Love and Lua, is to find kind of an arcade game, and I'm talking like an old school arcade game, to base your idea around, because those tend to be the easiest ones to find like tutorials and stuff for. It's also because they were built for arcades back in the day. They're built around having smaller memories and about having smaller like sizes that they could actually support. So it makes it more likely for you to be able to finish them in a small amount of time. Yeah, you can make a shmup or a bullet hell. Yeah. And like, I'm not asking you guys to do something. You guys have all seen by now your grades for your 2D games. I think all of you have. I think I graded all of those. So you kind of know what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for greatness. I'm a lot harder on level design games. For this class, I'm looking for you guys to make something to, wade in the kiddie pool, for lack of a better term. So I just want something simple. And next week I'll probably run through something, or I'll give you a recording. I haven't decided yet, because generally I want to make next week lab week for y'all, so that you have working time. Yeah, but anyways, so I did say I was gonna show you later on Hello World. Okay, yeah, we're on Hello World. Okay, so Hello World, this is gonna be your first assignment for this week, and I'm gonna run through everything. Like, this is still very much formulated the way that I would have done it if I taught it in class, which I thought I'd fixed, and then apparently I didn't. So, basically, you're just gonna print Hello World at a random spot on your canvas, whether you do it with Pyxel or do it with Pygame. It doesn't matter. If you want to try it with both, just to see how both of them work, that's on you. You guys know where all my repls are, so there's a bunch of them. There's Pygame Hello World and Pyxel Hello World. And Pyxel Hello World does a little bit more than, and so does Pygame Hello World, does a little bit more than just having that. And I do have a bunch of notes. Again, I try and make these full of comments for you guys, so that if you are looking at my repls, that they're actually helpful rather than just random code. So again, to do Hello World, or to set up Pyxel, class app is kind of your first thing you do, and then define, because we're doing a function. This is 2 underscores, I'm pretty sure it's 2. It's 2 underscores init __ self. Then I tell it, hey, I want to initialize a window that's 160 by 120 with the caption Hello Pyxel. To load, because this is basically, when we were talking about love, this was what we would call load. So I have 2 images, and I'm going to load them at 0, 0, both of them, because why not? One of them is a meeple image, one of them is a train image. So meeple, train. Again, that should look relatively the same. The only thing that's going to be different is that you have this, hey, instead of calling it a name, we're calling it by its numbers. And that's because the way that this works is that because there are only 3 image banks, or 3 image banks, you have to tell it where to load to. So yeah, I want to load the first image to the slot that's called 0. I want to load the second image to the slot that's called 1. And if I had a third image, I would load it to the slot called 3. And then these are kind of our global variables. This is saying, hey, I want a start X and a start Y for text. Speed, go right, go down, train. So, and we need to do this to make sure that it's applied to everything and actually useful for everything. And then this is going to be the last line that you always write for init, for your load function. You want to say, hey, Pyxel, run, and these are the two kind of things I want to run inside of this. So then we go to update, and all update is doing is saying, if things are go right, it moves the text and it bounces us up and down, or left and right. And hey, if I'm allowed to go down, go down that way. Moving the train, if Pyxel.button, so hey, if the button is pressed that is called key right, or the gamepad to the right is pressed, then move the train to the right. To exit, again, the quit key. And then draw. So again, we always want to make sure that we draw, or we want to clear to whatever color our screen is meant to be. And then you just draw exactly the same way, pretty much the same way that you did before. Except instead of saying draw, we're going to use BLT. BLT means blit, and basically that means draw. For lack of a better word, that means draw it. So, and this is saying, do the thing, do this thing, draw your text, so it's just pixel.text. And you're going to see that because this says down here, this pixel.framerate divided by 16, or frame count. So what this is doing is that this is where your color code goes. However, if you do something like this, pixel.framecount, and then remember this is our modulo operator, this will cause it to flash colors. So you could just say 1, 2, 3, etc. through 16, no problem. Or we can make it flash colors, because why not? And then we can say, how we want to do everything. So if we run this, and sometimes you're going to get this weird kind of rectangle around things. It's not actually there. I don't 100% know why. It sometimes shows up and sometimes doesn't. So now you can see we've got a train that only moves to the right. It never moves back to the left because I never wrote the button code to move it to the left. But so we have our flashing text. We have our text that bounces off the walls. And you can see these images are actually really smooth. But because of the way that this translates, they're no longer smooth. You can also tell that they're not the same color because they're not in our color bank. The same way that the train, they should be this bright yellow color with that kind of tannish outline. Instead, they're kind of goldenrod with brown. That's because that's the closest colors that we can get with Pyxel. So, alternatively, Pygame. And let me go ahead and run it first, and I'll show you what it looks like. So you can tell the sprites look a little bit cleaner. They're the right colors. If we press the right key, we've got a train that now loops, because apparently I decided to loop it on this one. You can also tell the flashing works a little bit different. Things are faster, and that just has to do with frame rate. But pretty much it's similar. It's really similar. So for Pygame, again, you don't have to wrap things. You do have to wrap a game over loop, but other than that, you don't have to like wrap it in a class or anything. So this is probably telling me that it's imported, but it's never used. These are the 3 import statements that you tend to use when you're using Pygame. System, see if you need a timer, Pygame, and then random. So again, we use init, which is initialize, and it kind of automatically does it. You don't have to do anything other than say, hey, pygame.init, and that's going to be like your first line of code that you always write. You don't have to do it this way, but you can. So I define my width and height variables and set my size to be a tuple. We talked about tuples. Tuples are immutable, unchangeable kind of lists of things. So in this case, it's just 2. And we set black to another tuple, which is our RGB kind of code. So we know black is going to be 0, 0, 0. So instead of having to literally say 0, 0, 0 every time, I can just call black. So we set the screen size to be our size, so width and height. And then we set the display to be hello world. Loading images, this looks a lot more like what we did inside of Love. We give them variable names. So meeple, train, pygame.imageLoad, train, pygame.image.load. Again, those look a lot like what we saw in Love. And like I said right here, while I'm not using it, there is a getRect function. So this gives you access to the dimensions, and you can call to the left, right, top, bottom. So it makes collision simpler, or it's supposed to. It doesn't always. So yeah, instead of having to do the math that we had to do with Love to figure out like if something was bumping on the left or the right side, we can just call the right of the sprite. So I'm calling, random stuff for RGB. Static non-moving font with flashing colors. Again, you can define your font. In this case, I'm just using Comic Sans because why not torture everybody? And then this sets up your font render. So my font.render, what I want the words to be, whether it's just false is generally going to be your thing. Just go with that. And then what your color is. So moving text again, Technicolor 250, 40. This is just to start it, and then we'll end up starting and changing the colors. And again, it's just to set up the text so that we don't have to worry about changing it or doing it down in draw, but you could do it down in draw without much of a problem. So moving X, moving Y, move right, move down again. So now we need a game loop. And like I said, I use game over here, but there's other options. Like this one uses while. Use while 1. It's still a loop. It just loops it a different way. I may even use a different one here. I don't know. I don't remember. Because again, depending on... So while true, again, a third different type of loop. It's basically you just need to have a loop here to say do stuff while things is happening. When it's not happening, close the application. So yeah. Think of it like your main function in Java or C++. Yeah. Where were we at? We were at Pygame Hello World. Okay, so basically what this is going to say, hey, we're going to say pressed equals pygame.keyGetPressed. That way we don't have to write pygame.key.getPressed every time. We can just say pressed. So if pressed and what's pressed, the pygame.writeKey, move the train to the new train, or the train location plus 0.5, so, And if the train is bigger than the width, move it back to the beginning, or back to below If you're using key down or key up, then it gets written a different way, and generally gets written inside of the loop. So, for event in Pygame, if event type equals Pygame quit, so if the X button is pressed or any other quit event is pressed, then game over equals true. So now, how to change the colors of the fonts. We basically set this up again, and we tell it this again, and it'll randomly select between 0 and 255. So this is another thing that makes you guys' life much easier, is that the color works on RGB, a normal RGB, so it is 0 to 255. So if you go and you find an RGB code, sometimes you need to subtract 1 because generally those are between 1 and 256. But if you go and you say, hey, I want to pick a really pretty RGB color. Let's find a nice RGB. Let's find something that gives me an RGB. So like this one. You're going to actually use 63, 224, 208. You may have to switch it over to 62, 223, 207, but it's going to be so slight that they should be pretty close to each other. Whereas if we were doing this with love, you've got to divide each of these by 255 to get to where you want it to be, so that it's between 0 and 1. But here with Pygame, you just use your RGB. You don't have to do any kind of conversions, which is nice. And now, with the assignment that I showed you guys, you're not having to move the text, you're not having to do anything. You just basically need to write the render and where to put it. So, I'm not asking you to do anything crazy. I'm not even asking you to like randomize where it goes each time. I'm just asking you to write it in a spot. Just to say that you know or can figure out how to do that. So, and again, this moves the font. And then on every update, we need to erase what we did. So that's screen.fill. And then this is drawing everything where we want it to be. So this is how you would do your text. So you'd say, hey, I want to blit to the screen. So I want to draw to the screen. I want to draw my text, and I want to draw it at 100 by 100. You display, or you flip the display. And then after your game loop is all over, you just want to quit. So do you see how these, they work the same, but they have similar coding, but they're also very different. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So, you're gonna just write me hello world. And I say random spot. Again, I say random spot, but all I'm meaning is pick a place to put it. Not randomize it. Just pick a place to write it. It can be 100 by 100. It can be 10 by 10. It can be 200 by 200. It just depends on how big you set your window to be. Again, y'all pretty much know how to get to my REPLs, so you can look at those. I also give you this guy's tutorial. And again, this is super, super simple. That's literally centering the text. So, and he'll talk about, you know, how to do extra stuff if you want extra stuff. And again, see, like, this is a massive kind of thing. But really, all you need to know, all you need to see as far as Pygame goes is kind of this part up here. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm not asking for anything crazy. It's just for you guys to kind of dip your toes in, make sure that you can figure it out. And again, you can do Pygame, you can do Pyxel. Pyxel, I think, has a hello world on here for you guys to follow as well. Yeah. So same thing. Pixel.text, it flashes. Don't so much worry about that. But yeah. So, let's go to the next thing. Yay! Says nobody. So, drawing in Pyxel and Pygame. So, remember how, or maybe you don't remember, in Love and Lua, I made you guys draw a thing, and then you had to animate a rocket? You're gonna do the same thing here. You're gonna draw me an animal. That's what I'm asking you guys to do. So, if you're gonna do it with Pyxel, Pyxel again is a much more limited palette. It's much more pixelated. It's much more jagged. But these are kind of how, these are the codes for that. You always do your clear screen. Pget is to get the color of a pixel at a spot, which is pretty handy. You know, it's like an eyedropper. Lines, Rex with a border, circle with a border. That's about what you get. And then a good example, again, I like Nerd Paradise's tutorials, so especially on Pygame. This is the one that I definitely suggest looking at for how to do different things. So how to draw circles, how to draw outlines, why outlines are problematic, so how to make better outlines, how to draw a polygon. But a lot of this is going to look pretty much identical to Lua and Love to draw things. But again, this is to get you guys thinking about how to draw, how to work with inside, or how to work inside of Pygame and Pyxel, Pygame or Pyxel. And yeah, so they have, theirs is long. They have multiple functions to do their different things, and I'm not asking you to do that. I just want you to draw something. So, examples. These are both mine, in case you were curious. And if you didn't have links to my REPL before, there you go. This one's done in Pygame. This one's done in Pyxel. Gee, I wonder how you can tell. And yeah, I just want you to draw an animal. So it doesn't have to be this kind of crazy. It doesn't have to, it can be, this is even kind of overblown for what I'm asking you guys. I just want you guys to draw something. Again, this is where graph paper is helpful. Again, this is up to you guys what you want to do. I can walk you through how I did both of these so that that's more helpful. So Pyxel. I set the window to 200 by 200 for the bunny guy. Let's make sure this is the right one. Let's let it think. Yeah, so there's a bunny. The bunny has definitely seen things. Alternatively, it's up way too early. One or the other. And you're going to find that you can actually press the little X key up there. So, you know, things are good. So, we initialize, again, define, initialize, and I set it in the class like we're supposed to, just because, and again, you don't have to do this class app. However, it's what Pyxel suggests, so if an engine suggests you do something, it's generally suggested for a reason, aka something will break if you don't, so use at your own risk if you don't do it. So, again, I set this to Hello Pyxel, but I could set it to Bun has seen things. And then we do this line. And this line again will always be the last line that we put inside of our init. And remember that this is all built on tabs, so if we come up here we can see that that's all self-contained into one thing. Then in update, because we're not moving anything or changing anything, the only thing that we really want to say is, hey, if we press the Q key, quit the game. And again, you don't really need that if you don't want it. So, and we can see that that's the only thing that's an update. And then inside of draw, we want to draw to self, and then we want to say, hey, clear the screen to 0. If we change this to like 1, then we can see it's going to pick whatever's in the one spot of Pyxel. So it's that blue color. I don't remember what all colors are. Let's see. I know that I use, this is 9 and 7. Yeah, I use 9 and 7 mostly, so, you know, you can play around with it. The color chart is there for you to look at, but 0 is black if you want black. And then the way that rectangles are drawn is that you say, hey, here are the top left corner. So that's what's going to be the top left corner point. So kind of if we were to say 0, 0, like up here. And then what is the bottom right corner? So down here. So in this case, it would be 200, 200. And then what color it is. Relatively handy. Whereas when we saw love, we did, you know, the top corner and then we did the width and the height. This one, it's like, hey, what are these two corners? And then I'll draw between them. In circles, you actually say, hey, what is the center point of my circle? And then you say how much the radius is, which is half the circle. Diameter is the full, radius is half. And then your color code. So, in this case, 165, 135 is the center point. The radius is 5.5, and the color is 9. And then lines are just, hey, what's the point, the start point, and the end point? And then your color code. So, relatively easy. And I have comments here that tell you what each of these things actually do or draw. Until we get to here, and then I just gave up and don't tell you what they do. Oh no, that's the back leg. So, the back leg is made up of a bunch of things. The face, the ears, but again, it's just all circles, rectangles, and lines. And then after we're done with everything, we just gotta tell it, hey, run the app. You just gotta make sure, that's like the most important thing, that if you put this in class app, after everything is said and done, you gotta write this app. So just like how I told you guys that the best option is to write, in Lua is to write your function and then at the end of it write end before you write anything inside the function. My huge suggestion is to do class app and then app immediately together. Because otherwise you will forget and you're like, why is nothing running? Why can't I see anything? And it's because it's never called. So where that was Pyxel, Pygame, you're going to see I have functions. So I'm drawing two functions. I'm drawing the background and I'm drawing the fox. And I do them separately just so that I could separate them out and it wasn't quite as hard. And we're going to see that probably gets broken down even further. But our major loop for our game is while true, if we do the quit thing, quit. And if not, draw the background, and update the display. Now, again, we call import Pygame, and then we use pygame.init to start everything up, to say, hey, yeah, launch Pygame, get it all going. And then, again, to save myself time, I define what all my colors are. So these are just RGBs, and these are tuples. Again, tuples are just immutable, kind of like a list or an array, depending on what you're used to. And tuples are definitely often used when it comes to doing coordinates and color codes. Is where I first saw tuples, which is how you know that I was graphic heavy rather than like pure programmer stuff. So that's how I always remember them. I always remember that an RGB is a tuple. So yeah, so you're just gonna set these up, and so, or at least I set them up because it makes your life easier than having to type each of these down if you're gonna be reusing colors more than once. So, and then game display, this is another way to do this instead of having to set, width equals 800, height equals 600, size equals 800, comma, or 600, or whatever. Or you can just do it all in one file swoop. So game display equals pygame.display.set mode 800 by 600, and then game display fill, and I fill it with a dark blue, which I have said is 71152. So then we have a list. So these use, and this is not commented, and I'm sorry, I don't know why, I know I did comment, I did a commented version, I don't know why this is not commented. So this is a set of points, and basically this is to set a polygon, to create a polygon with all of these points. And the same for a tree. So it's like, hey, start at 0.600, and if you guys remember those old connect the dot kind of things, that's what this is. It's like put a point here, put a point here, put a point here, put a point here, put a point, etc., etc., etc. And then eventually we're going to connect all of those dots together into a polygon once we actually go to draw. So I have my grass list, I have my tree list, which are just all my points, so that they're pre-set up so that I don't have to do them each individually later. And then I start drawing. So I draw a circle, game display dark blue, 250, 275, and it's 600 is the radius. Let me actually make sure on that, because I honestly realized that I could be wrong. Pygame tutorials. Drawing. Yeah, radius. Okay. Ooh, I had to set a moment. I'm working in another engine because I'm trying a couple new things to see whether they've worked better. And one of the ones I have uses a diameter, and it had a sudden moment of, was it that one that I was working in, or was it this one? This one has a radius, so this one uses radius. Pygame drawing. So yeah, so it's, like I said, surface, color, XY, radius. Yeah, XY, radius. So you're looking at the center point. Circles in general for any engine that you could possibly ever want are always going to look at your center point. And that's all it's saying. It's saying, hey, where do we want to draw the circle? In this case, we want to draw it to the game display. And some of you may be saying, well, like, why do we do that? Don't we always want to draw directly to the screen? The answer is no. The answer is that you can have kind of a back burner, a secondary kind of thing that you're drawing to, and then you can kind of trade places with each other. You probably won't do that, especially not in this class, but you could. So as a result, you're always going to say, hey, what's the name of the place I want to draw? And generally it's going to be like surface or game display or whatever you call it, because you have to name it. And then, or self. Self is a big one. Self is what we use inside of that thing. Pyxel. And then you do your color code, or because I have defined my colors here, I can just say, hey, dark blue. And then the center point, and remember it's a tuple, so it has to be in the little parentheses. And then how wide is the radius? So this is a very big, this is the probably the moon, the back, well, not the back moon, but the rays around it. So if we come over here and press play, it's this back kind of dark bluish ring. And then deep blue is the next one, and yeah, so on and so forth. Until we get to white, which is the moon, which is this one. And then to do, what is it called? To do scritchy, to make a polygon like that, it takes a list. So setting it up like this makes life incredibly easy later down the line, because again, we can also minimize these guys so that we can see more code. And so what we do for this is we say, hey, draw a polygon. Again, where are we drawing it to? The game display. What's the color? This can be a tuple, or it can be a variable that is a tuple. And then we need a list of points. So you could either literally write out this whole thing right here, or because we've already written it here, and to make it look nicer, we can just say, hey, yeah, we want to do grass list and tree list. And then the leaves, or the top of the tree, are just circles. So circle, 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 circle. And they just overlap each other. And again, remember that we kind of talked about this with this idea of returning something. So I return true when it comes to Python. You don't always have to. I do, just to get into a habit of putting a return statement for everything. So yeah. Meanwhile, drawing the fox, again, you're gonna see these are all lists because all of this is multi-angle pieces. Pretty much the fox is, I think, 100% made out of polygons. So lists, more lists, and then yeah, draw the polygon, draw the polygon, draw polygon, 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 polygon. Return true. And then we just have, because again, nothing is done. All of this stuff may be written here, but none of it is actually done until we call it inside of this game loop. And since the game loop never really exits, it just kind of sits there. Does this stuff make sense? Again, for Pygame, this is going to be your best tutorial. At least the easiest one to follow. Don't worry too much about this last giant thing because that's more annoying than it should be. But these kind of lines, it'll tell you how to draw everything. But you can also go into Pygame and if you get into the docs, you can look at draw, and if you want to figure out how to draw, you know, an ellipse or an arc, you can click and it'll talk to you about it. It'll say, hey, this is what it needs to be, this is how it's going to work, what are the parameters, what does it return, kind of how do you do it. And you'll even find some comments. How do I check if an ellipse has collided? You know, sometimes they're mean. But yeah, you'll find some things in here. But again, I'm not 100%, I'm not asking you guys to make a masterpiece. I got way carried away when I drew the little fox guy, so yeah. I had a lot of fun with that. Yeah, we're just gonna go with that. Because, yes, I'm a programmer, 100% I'm a programmer. But, I also do lots and lots of art. So, and that's mainly my job, my actual job. Well, okay, this is my actual job, but my game gig, I'm the artist, 3D modeler. So, I do programming for them too, but there are 3 programmers on staff, so we're good on that. But I'm the one that does all of the art stuff. Yay! Which is why I teach. Over the summer, I taught 3D modeling and rendering 1. So I'm qualified, and I have degrees in all of it. So I've got degrees in programming, I have degrees in animation. So yeah. Okay, so you guys are just gonna draw me some stuff. Now, moving sprites. You guys have to do... No, you don't. You don't have to do another rocket. This one's gonna be easy. This one, you do not have to draw anything. You're just gonna grab a sprite, your choice. It can be a meme, it can be a actual sprite, it can be something that you pull from Kenny and L, it can be whatever you want. A drawing, it can be anything. And you're just gonna move it. That's this assignment. Import 2 sprites of your choice. For the first sprite, have it bounce off the walls back and forth, either horizontally or vertical. And for the second sprite, you're going to have it start and then move it in the same direction as the first sprite. So if they're both moving horizontally, so, you know, that's across, that's left to right. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to have one loop around. So how we saw the train in this one. So when the train goes off the screen, it comes back around on the other side. You're going to have one sprite that does that, and you're going to have another one that just bounces up and down. It doesn't have to bounce angle to angle. It just needs to go when it hits the bottom, it goes back to the top, and when it hits the top, it goes back to the bottom. So that's going to feel a lot like how you did the Lua one, or the Love one with your rocket. For the train, again, you've got the code here, but all it does is it says, hey, move by X amount each update, and if my left point is off the screen, just set me back to -64 so that I'm off the screen on the opposite side, and then we can just keep going. That's all it is. It's not anything meant to trip you up. It's not meant to be a trick question. And you can see that right here. It's going to be an update. Yeah, right here. So if the right key is pressed, then move the train by 0.5 pixels per frame. If the train X, so if the left side of the train is greater than width, and again, you can use left of your rect, but where I'm not using it, this is easy. But if the train X is greater than the width, then hey, set train X back to -64 so that the train right doesn't come on the edge. So that's all there is to that. It's not meant to be a trick question. It's not meant to be anything crazy. In general, I really try hard not to write trick questions for y'all. I try really hard to not, because I hated those. I really, my biggest pet peeve are tests and quizzes that are designed for you to fail, because I don't think anybody learns well that way. Because then you double question, or like you completely question yourself and you don't think you ever know any answers, and that's no way to live. So yeah, I try really hard not to make things trick questions for y'all. So please, if something seems easy, the answer is it probably is. Um, and if it seems hard, ask me about it, because I'm more than happy to help. So yeah, when it comes to moving works exactly the same way. So, as Love and Lua, we just say, hey, if things have been pressed, do the thing. If not, don't do the thing. So inside of Pygame, it kind of looks like this. And again, I'm going to tell you that there's different ways to do it. If you use key down, key up, you write it inside your event loop. So inside of this loop here. And it's like if event dot key down. I don't really remember that one. I don't like using. If I can handle it, I'll use pressed, get key pressed over key down or key up. So this one's kind of separate, kind of the way that we talked about it inside of Lua or Love. So yeah, so you just write hey, and you could write if pygame.get key pressed, and then in these parentheses you would do this guy. But I like doing it this way. I like doing it this way where it's you set up pressed and you do that. That's actually, I think, how Pygame tells you to do it. But yeah, so you just tell it to hey, and then you just gotta make sure that down inside of your draw that you have that variable. That you have that one, that it's set at that variable that you're manipulating. So remember, we defined train x up here to be our starting point at 0.0. Notice that I made those so that they were floats, decimal numbers, so that I can make sure that I can manipulate it by decimals. Otherwise, if we set this to like a 1, we'd have to be casting back and forth, or at a 0, we'd have to be casting back and forth. 0.0 means we don't. Yeah. So as far as Pyxel goes, Pyxel is relatively easy as well. Again, see, we have this whole thing where we're doing the same exact thing. 0, 0, start x, start speed, train move x, 0, 0, train speed. And to do the train, it's just this. It says, hey, if the buttons are the key right, then self.trainMove equals where we were plus our speed, or we could just put 0.5 here if we wanted to hard code it. And if self.trainMove is greater than the pixel width, then move back to -64 and continue moving. Did that work? Huh. I didn't think that worked. No, the code is sound. I didn't think I saw it work the last time that we were in here. It may or may not, because Pyxel may be broken. Oh, there we go. So, yeah. So you can see we've got our whole looping train again. I just didn't press long enough. And then you just, again, have to make sure that when you draw it, you draw at the point. So you say, hey, that's my x. That's what I want to manipulate. Okay. Are there any questions about that? So, another example of how... That's not the right one. Another example of Pygame as far as moving goes. This is based off of what Pygame actually has for its official thing as far as how to make things move and bounce off of walls. So if we run it, and I haven't been playing around it, okay, cool. So they use a beach ball. I used an alien because why not? And this does use Rex. So like I said, you can check if the rect right or the rect left or the rect top or the rect bottom is touching, instead of having to manipulate, like, hey, if terrain X is greater than, you can say, hey, if the rect, the left side of our bounding box, you know, you can do that instead. And so this is just another way of doing it. And this is a different way of doing speed. Again, it says, hey, these are our speeds. And all this does is say, hey, you know, ball rect equals ball rect dot move, and its speed. This is how you'd use move with Rex, because it's got a move function. So instead of having to actually tell it to manipulate each time, you can tell it to actually do the speed thing. And then you can say if ball rect dot left, so if the left side of our bounding box is less than 0, or the rect, the right side of the rect is greater than the width, so if it's gone off the screen, then the first number, so this number right here, we want to switch it to negative. Or not really negative, we want to switch it to its opposite. Because a negative times a negative is a positive, and a positive times a negative is a negative. So all we have to do is multiply anything by a negative, and you'll get the opposite. And then we do the same thing for the top and the bottom. And yeah, so that's how you can do it that way. And if you want, we can see, I think we can still use 0.5 here. As I press the wrong keys. 0.5 may break it. We'll see. I can't remember how Rex quite work. Because the last time I did it, I wrote... Yeah. So 0.5 won't work. We can change it over because it will automatically lower it to 0. So we can switch this over to 1, and that'll at least make him slower. Should make him slower. So yeah, so you have to do a little bit more work if you want it to be partials, or if you want to change the frame rate, but that's another way of doing motion. Okay, any questions about this? If the question is which one is better to use, Rex, or just using the width of your sprite and the point, the X point, the start X point, it depends on what you're using and what you're doing. So both are acceptable. If you understand one better than the other, then use the one over the other. It depends as far as which one I like most, because I actually enjoy writing in Love more than I do in Pygame. I tend to use the other version because that's closer to what Pygame, or closer to what Lua does and Love does. But Rex are really, really handy. Being able to just check the left and check the right without having to know how wide your sprite is, that's really handy. That being said, the biggest issue with that is when the bounding box of your sprite is a lot bigger than your actual sprite image. So say you have a 200 by 200 image, and you only put a circle smack in the center, but you save it all out. So let me see if this will open quickly. If it won't, then we'll do something else. But yeah, if you have something in the center and there's a lot of extra space around it, it counts that extra space a lot of times. And so when it comes to that, Recs are a little bit harder to manage that extra space. Why? You were just open. Why are you taking so long? Because I had to yell at it, apparently. But so, and what I'm meaning is, that's fine. If you were to have, that's not the right one. Where did you put my... Okay. So if you were to have this and say it was 300 by 300, and you just took and put a star and you saved this out like this, the rect is going to register this whole thing and not just close to the star. So that's kind of the one caveat between them. Because it's easier to manipulate and say, hey, I know that like I've got this kind of offset here, so you can actually like check and make your offset for yourself using the startx kind of thing, easier than if you're using your check right, check left, check top, check bottom. So there are ways to do it, but that's definitely the one big thing that I kind of have. Yeah. So yeah, the short of the long is that they're both good. It just depends on what you want to use it for. So with that all said, one of your homeworks is going to be to go through a tutorial. You have 2 weeks for it, I think. November 6th. Yeah, you have 2 weeks for it, so don't feel overly terrified by it. But it would be good if you guys still don't know what you want to do for your game, to run through one of these really quickly, or to even look over both of them and figure out which one you like better, whether you like Pyxel or Pygame, because they both work differently. And it may be, again, like I said, the big kind of thing is you're going to find that Pygame has every tutorial under the sun that you could possibly ever want or need, whereas Pyxel is ostensibly easier if you can understand the logic. So this will run you through setting up Pyxel, or setting up Pong in Pyxel, or you can look at Pygame. And again, it'll walk you through everything. And in this case, I am asking for a link to your REPL. I do want you to maybe comment some things that you think are important, stuff like that. But it will walk you through, both of these will walk you through. You're going to see the Pygame one. It goes to there. There we go. So, yeah. Ignore all the comments at the bottom. So, it's just going to be kind of an opinion as to which one you like better. which one you think works better for you. But that's, yeah, it's a good idea to kind of at least look at them or run through them. Now, while your Pyxel or Pygame Pong is due on the 6th, the next week, the 13th, so we're on the 24th. You've got the 31st, you've got the 7th. Your actual Pygame games, or Pyxel game, depending on which one you build, is going to be due on the 13th. So, the sooner you get through Pong, the easier it's going to be for you to develop your own game, or you can do them simultaneously. Please don't make me Pong for your games, because I'm already letting you guys use a tutorial, or making you guys do a tutorial. If you want something that's similar to Pong, you could do a brick breaker, because that should use a lot of the Pong kind of code that you've already written. For your Pygame and Pyxel games, or Pygame or Pyxel game, singular, one, it's basically going to be the same thing as your love games. Do something for me, please. Like, just show me a little bit of effort. I'm relatively happy if you show me a little bit of effort. Yeah, if possible, I would love for you to have 2 scenes, so to switch it between a title screen and a playable area, or maybe you have multiple levels or something like that. If you want to see example code of what I did as a student who had no idea what I was doing, I have Dragon Run. I have it set up in GitHub. You guys can look over all of it if you really want to. Main is where everything is. And you can actually see how I coded it. I'm gonna tell you it's not coded greatly. I mean, it works. I'll go with that. It works. So that's something. It has multiple levels, and it loads levels from multiple different areas. It has different classes, it has different files, it has different everything. It's got all the images. But so it's actually got an exe, so you can actually run it too if you download all of it. But yeah, so that's a thing. If you wanted to see what it actually is, it was built off of Pac-Man. So, and again, this is an incredibly sped up version, but it's built up off of it's built off of Pac-Man, so only with knights and dragons, and the worst idea for how to do collision and timers ever invented. There's a lot I would do and should redo it, because I actually really liked how this turned out. I was really, really proud of myself when I did it. But this has been many years now, so I would do it much differently now. And if you kind of wanted to see how this actually all went together, this kind of explains how it was done. If I linked the right video, probably did, yeah. So it's the idea that it was a Pac-Man clone. It'll walk you through kind of how the programming all worked, how the flow was. It talks about how I built the map, which is going to look remarkably the same way that we did, or that I showed you guys how to do maps, or how I do maps in Love and Lua. This was kind of the test version of it. And believe you me, when I actually got things to show on the screen, I was really excited. Can you tell that Pygame and I are not 100% friends? I like Pygame, don't get me wrong, but it's a thing. It's a thing. Like, it works well enough. Works well enough. So yeah, so that's gonna be due on the 13th. You guys have your text adventures due next week. Pretty sure it's next week. Hopefully those are coming along, or at least being thought about coming along. Yeah, those are due next week. Yeah. And that's really all I have to talk about for today. Were there any questions, wants, desires, needs, hopes, dreams? Did you need to know about how next semester is gonna work? Anything like that? So, next semester. One, registration is like November 9th, I think, is when the earliest registration starts opening up. Two, next semester, 25% of classes are allowed to meet, 25% of a class is allowed to meet on campus. So, if you are in or were in MLH 200, so that's the big one where they teach most everything, level design, I know most modeling and rendering classes are in there, and animation classes. As many classes as they can get into 200 go into 200. It means the number of people allowed in that classroom at one time is 5. So, most professors are, especially professors from the game departments, are just choosing to either 100% teach and do everything online again, or they're going to teach online one day. So, like, if it's a Tuesday, Thursday class, they'll teach online Tuesdays. And then on Thursdays, it'll be a lab day. And students can sign up to come and use the classroom as their lab. That being said, the actual lab with the tutors is going to be on campus and open. However, it will be appointment only. So you'll have to make an appointment ahead of time before you go up to the campus to meet with the tutors. I think their plan is to still kind of keep the tutoring Zoom and the tutoring Discord open, but they will also be in person. They are kind of the sacrificial lambs to see if opening the campus back up works. Yeah, so basically everything is still going to be online. Semester or registration for next semester starts, I'm pretty sure it was November 9th was when it started for veterans, and then it opens up like on the 10th or the 11th for more people. If you are needing to get into GameSim, once registration opens, you will email Vicky. You are going to see my name on the instructor list for GameSim. Yes, I am the programming mentor person. However, I cannot put you in the class. Vicky has to do that. I don't have the power as an adjunct professor to add a student in. So you will email Vicky. You will email Vicky, and not me. Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions about what's due? About anything? Everybody wishes they had more time. It's just the issue of the world. So we are gonna go with your games are due. Your text game is due next week, and again, it doesn't have to be something super blown out. And your Pyxel Pong is due the week after that, and your final, not final, your Pygame Pyxel game is due the week after that. Now, things could change. I do have about a week wiggle room. However, for now, I want you to all work towards that deadline or date. Basically, next week will be work week. Again, I may do the same thing that I did last time, where I ask you guys to, or I may just, what's it called? I may record a demo for you guys early. But it'll be something simple, kind of possibly even the clicker game, the chicken clicker game, just to give you an idea. Unless you guys can give me something like specific that you want me to walk through. Because one of the things about the chicken clicker game is that it could be changed into a lot of things, like an endless runner or a catch the hatchlings or things like that. Technically, you could even make it into like a Fruit Ninja game. So yeah. Again, 100% there is no shame in finding a good tutorial that helps you, or basically makes the whole game for you. Is that what I want you to do? No, but I also know it's what like 90% of you are gonna do, so no shame and no shade. Just let me know where you got your tutorials, because I kind of want to look through them. Yeah. So there, like I said, there is about a week of grace period if we absolutely need it, but you really shouldn't need more than 3 weeks to build this. And basically, if those of you who haven't read comments on things that I've written to you about your games and things like that, after all of this is said and done, your final kind of thing that you do is you're gonna take either your Pyxel Pygame game or your Lua game, your love game, and you're gonna make it better. Like, that's your final kind of grade. And that's basically, once we are done with your Pygame games or Pyxel games, that's what the rest of this class is about. We're gonna look at phaser.js, we're gonna look at JavaScript, but we're not really gonna look at it so far in depth that you have to make another game. And that's meant to help you, especially because I know you guys are getting, at that point, getting close to finals. I'm sorry if you can hear the dog in the background. Basset hounds, yo. Basset hounds. So yeah. This will not be a thing. Okay, so any other questions? Wants, desires that I can maybe help with? I'm not doing progress checks for this one because y'all pretty much didn't do them last time, so that's a detriment to your score if you don't do them. So, again, questions, wants, desires, needs. Okay, so that being said, the rest of the time of this class is for you guys. I suggest, if you haven't already started on your text adventure, that this is now a great time to start on your text adventure and get that ball rolling. Especially if you're making something that's a fantasy setting or a fictional setting kind of thing. Believe it or not, you're gonna have to do dialogue trees, or maybe you won't have to do dialogue trees, but it may get more complicated than you thought it was going to be. If you don't have ideas for what to do, look at a classic fairy tale and just kind of adapt it to make it into a text adventure. So pull your favorite story or your favorite Disney movie and make it into a choose your own adventure type story. You know, Snow White, does she take the apple? Does she not take the apple? If she takes the apple, you dead. Cinderella. Choose to wear glass slippers, choose to go to the ball, choose to not go to the ball. You know. Those tend to work well and easy. But, again, it's up to y'all. Oh, and I guess you're all in here today. Do you guys want me to upload today's lecture, or do you care? Because I will if you want me to. If you don't, then that will save everybody time. But I am more than happy to upload it for those. Yeah, okay, so I'll upload it, no problem. Yeah, okay, so I'll upload it. Okay, so with that said, y'all are free as birds can be to go do whatever you feel like doing for the rest of class time. Again, I do suggest working on any of the number assignments. And again, the assignments that were assigned today, so the drawing, the moving, the hello world, those are only meant to take you all together, all of them like literally together, a few hours, not more than 3 or 4 hours tops. Not really more than 2 hours, because that's the whole point why this class is short, or at least this lecture is short, is so that you had time to like actually work on labs. So, okay, with all that said, I will leave you be to this wonderful, glorious Saturday day, and I will see y'all next week.